Hello everyone, and welcome to my Young and the Restless official 24 channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Lily Winters had always carried herself with poise, grace, and a heart full of forgiveness, even when the world around her was chaotic and destructive. But as she sat in the dimly lit hospital room, the faint sound of machines humming against the silence, she knew that her time was slipping away and that the weight of her secret could no longer remain buried inside her soul. Her breathing was shallow, her once vibrant eyes dulled by the storm of illness ravaging her body, but still there was a strength in her that pulled Kane Ashby closer to her bedside, his hand trembling as he held hers, desperate to believe in miracles even though the doctors had already whispered grim truths in the hallways. And it was in those fleeting breaths that Lily decided to release the truth that would forever alter Kane's life. For she could no longer leave this world with the secret pressed against her chest like a stone crushing her spirit. And as she looked at Kane, she remembered all the years they had loved, fought, broken apart, and come back together again. How many betrayals, misunderstandings, and long nights of sorrow had shaped their journey, yet there was always an invisible thread binding them no matter how jagged the edges of their love became. Her lips quivered as she began to speak, her voice almost too faint to hear, and Kane leaned in closer, his tears falling onto her hand, his chest tightening with dread as though he knew something monumental was about to be unleashed. And Lily whispered that the life they had built together, the sacrifices and triumphs, had been shaped by a decision she made long ago, one she never confessed because the timing never felt right, and now the cruel irony was that time itself was the one luxury she no longer had. So she released the words like a fragile bird into the air. Kane, there's something about Charlie and Matty I never told you. The moment stretched into eternity as his mind raced, fear seizing his heart, because the children had always been the one foundation they both clung to when everything else collapsed. And Kane, panicked, begged her to go on, to explain, to give clarity before she drifted away, and Lily, gasping for strength, revealed that one of the twins wasn't his biological child. That in the blur of grief and mistakes after Drew's death, in the loneliness that consumed her when Kane was absent emotionally and sometimes physically, she had turned to someone else, someone Kane knew, someone who had been close enough to comfort her during that storm, and from that night of vulnerability a child had been conceived. Though she swore her love for Kane never wavered, her loyalty to him as a partner had remained intact in all the ways that mattered. But biology had betrayed the illusion of perfection, and she had lived every day since then terrified that the truth would come to light, terrified that it would destroy not just Kane but their children's sense of identity. And Kane, staggered by the revelation, felt his entire world crumble beneath him, his knees weak, his breath ragged as he demanded to know which child, which twin he had raised believing to be his blood was in fact fathered by another man. And Lily's tears streamed as she whispered the name, her voice cracking, a confession that shattered the silence like glass breaking on marble, because the man she named was not a stranger, not someone from a one-night lapse, but someone Kane himself had once considered a rival and a friend. Daniel Romalotti. Lily explained that in those days of grief, Daniel had been there, understanding her pain, listening when Kane had been consumed with his own battles. And though it was never planned, never intended, the loneliness and the aching void had led to one night that haunted her ever since. And from that night Matty had been conceived, her brilliance, her spirit, and her compassion reflecting not just Lily's heart but also Daniel's quiet strength. And Kane, reeling, staggered backward, his mind replaying every smile, every milestone, every embrace with Matty, now colored by this revelation that his bond with her had been built on love but not blood. Yet the moment his heart began to break, Lily reached for his hand again, her grip surprisingly strong for someone so fragile. And she begged him not to let this truth undo everything they had built, not to let Matty feel less loved, not to let Charlie carry guilt or shame for being the twin who was biologically his, for love, she reminded him, had always been the glue that kept their family together. And though Kane's chest burned with anger, betrayal, confusion, he looked at Lily and saw not the woman who had lied but the woman he had always fought for, the woman he had crossed oceans for, forgiven, and adored even when their love was splintered. And he realized that this final confession was not about tearing him apart but about giving him the chance to heal fully, to live honestly, to love their children without shadows between them. And Lily, knowing her final minutes were slipping away, begged Kane to promise her that he would protect their children, that he would forgive her not for her sake but for theirs. And Kane, broken, collapsed beside her bed, sobbing, his forehead pressed against her hand, promising through choked tears that he would never let their children feel anything less than whole, never let this truth be used as a weapon, and Lily, relieved, let out a faint smile, the corners of her lips lifting as though the burden had finally released its grip on her soul, and with one final breath she whispered, "I love you, Kane," always, before her eyes fluttered shut and the monitors around her began to wail, the sound slicing through the room like the cruel reminder of finality, and Kane cried out in anguish, holding her lifeless hand, begging her to come back, but she was gone, leaving him with the unbearable weight of her secret and the impossible task of carrying on, knowing that the truth she revealed would ripple through not just his life but Daniel's, Matty's, Charlie's, and the entire Winters and Ashby families, because in Genoa City no secret ever stayed hidden forever. And as Kane sank to the floor of the hospital room, his body trembling with grief and rage, he realized that Lily's final moments had not only been a goodbye but a test, a passing of responsibility, and though the world outside continued to move, for Kane Ashby time had frozen, and the only thing louder than the silence was the haunting echo of Lily's last words. Kane Ashby stumbled out of Lily's hospital room in a haze of anguish, his mind reeling with the words she had whispered to him in her final moments, her confession clawing at his heart like a knife that wouldn't stop twisting. Because while he wanted to remember her as the woman who loved him fiercely, forgave him endlessly, and held their family together, the revelation that Matty was not his biological daughter gnawed at his every breath, stealing from him the comfort of pure grief and replacing it with the torment of betrayal and confusion. And as he stood in the sterile hallway with the scent of antiseptic and sorrow clinging to his lungs, he clenched his fists against the walls, his knuckles bleeding as if punishing his body might silence the storm inside his head. But nothing could erase Lily's words, nothing could take back the truth that Daniel Romalotti, a man Kane had tolerated, a man who had been tangled in Lily's past before, was connected to his family in the most intimate way. And though Kane had sworn to Lily in those final minutes that he would protect their children and never let them feel unloved, the promise felt like a mountain crushing him now, because how could he look Matty in the eyes knowing she carried another man's blood? How could he not see Daniel's face reflected in hers every time she smiled? And how could he keep this from the children without betraying Lily's dying wish? For the truth in Genoa City had a way of clawing its way out no matter how tightly it was buried, and already Kane could feel the weight of decisions pressing down on him. Should he confront Daniel immediately? Should he tell Neil and Devon that Lily's secret had reshaped their family tree? Or should he carry this burden alone until it inevitably exploded like every other secret in this town? His thoughts were shattered by Devon's voice calling out to him, his brother-in-law's eyes red and swollen, his grief raw, and Devon asked what Lily's last words had been, what she had said before the machines went silent, and Kane, trembling, lied, telling Devon that Lily had only said she loved them, that she wanted the family to stay strong, and while that was true, it wasn't the whole truth. But how could he unleash this devastating revelation now, when Devon's heart was already breaking, when the Winters family was on the edge of collapse? So Kane buried the truth in his chest like a ticking time bomb and embraced Devon, whispering comfort, while inside he felt hollow. Days turned into weeks, and the funeral came, a beautiful tribute filled with memories, laughter through tears, and stories of Lily's boundless love. And Kane sat in the front pew with Charlie and Matty beside him, his arms around them, his tears falling freely as they clung to him. But every time he looked at Matty his chest tightened, because while she was his daughter in every way that mattered, in the eyes of the world she was also Daniel's. And as he spotted Daniel at the back of the church, silent, respectful, his eyes glistening with genuine grief, Kane felt rage boiling beneath his sorrow, wanting to storm down the aisle and demand answers, demand why Daniel never confessed, why he never claimed what was his. But Kane bit his tongue, honoring Lily's plea, knowing this wasn't the moment, yet the fire inside him only grew, threatening to consume him with every beat of his heart. After the service, when the mourners dispersed and the Winters family gathered for the private meal, Kane found himself watching Daniel from across the room, noticing how Daniel's eyes lingered on Matty with a softness that made Kane's stomach churn, and though Daniel said nothing, his silence spoke volumes, as if on some level he had always suspected, or perhaps he knew all along. And the possibility that Daniel had carried this secret for years sent Kane spiraling into anger. But when Matty came to him, resting her head on his shoulder, telling him she didn't know how she would survive without Mom, Cain's fury melted into anguish, because she was innocent, she was his daughter in every way that mattered, and how dare fate, biology, or betrayal tell him otherwise? So Cain tightened his arms around her, vowing silently to protect her from ever knowing the truth, even as the secret burned him alive. But Genoa City is not a town where secrets sleep for long, and as weeks passed, whispers began to rise. Daniel spending more time near the twins, Devon noticing Cain's distracted state, and Phyllis Summers, sharp-eyed and nosy as ever, catching the flicker of something hidden in Cain's grief, for Phyllis knew Daniel too well, knew his past entanglements with Lily, and when she saw Daniel staring just a little too long at Matty during a family gathering, her mind began piecing together what no one else dared to say aloud, and she cornered Cain at Crimson Lights one morning, her voice low but laced with that dangerous curiosity, pressing him with questions he refused to answer, and though Cain tried to brush her off, Phyllis smirked knowingly, telling him that secrets have a way of destroying people in this town, especially when children are involved, and Cain left in a fury, knowing it was only a matter of time before the walls closed in. Alone at night, Cain poured himself drink after drink, staring at old photos of Lily, replaying her final moments, her voice echoing in his mind, and though he wanted to hate her for the betrayal, his love for her outweighed his anger, leaving him trapped in a prison of conflicted emotions, because Lily's dying wish was for him to protect the children and forgive. But how could he forgive when every time he looked at Matty, he saw Daniel standing between him and the woman he loved, and how could he protect them when Phyllis, Daniel, and even fate itself seemed determined to unravel the truth? One evening, Cain finally confronted Daniel in the shadows of Chancellor Park, his voice low and venomous, demanding to know if Daniel knew, if he had been living all these years aware that Matty was his daughter, and Daniel, stunned, denied it, swearing he had no idea, that he had always loved Lily but never imagined that their night of grief had resulted in a child, and Cain, seething, grabbed him by the collar, ready to pummel him, but stopped when he saw the pain in Daniel's eyes, the same pain that mirrored his own, and realized that whether Daniel knew or not, the damage was already done, the past unchangeable, and now the only choice was how to move forward. Yet even as Cain swore he would never let Daniel near Matty, never let him disrupt their family, a part of him feared the inevitable, because the truth had a way of clawing to the surface, and when it did, Matty and Charlie's world would shatter, just as his had the night Lily whispered her final secret. Cain returned home from his heated confrontation with Daniel, his body trembling, his mind spinning with 1,000 thoughts that refused to quiet down. And when he walked through the door of the house he once shared with Lily, the silence was suffocating, broken only by the soft sound of Matty typing at the dining table and Charlie playing music upstairs, their lives slowly trying to return to normal in the aftermath of their mother's death, while Cain carried the unbearable knowledge that nothing about their family was normal anymore. He stood in the doorway watching Matty, his heart aching with pride and pain, because she was brilliant, kind, everything a father could want in a daughter, and yet the cruel truth whispered in his mind like a shadow. She wasn't his by blood. And for the first time since Lily's confession, Cain realized the depth of his torment wasn't just anger at Lily or Daniel but fear. Fear that one day Matty would find out and look at him not as her father, but as the man who had lied to her entire life, and the thought nearly broke him. He poured himself a glass of whiskey, his hand shaking as he drank deeply, and Matty glanced up, her voice soft and concerned. "Dad, are you okay?" And Cain forced a smile, choking back tears, insisting he was fine, just tired. But the way Matty studied him with those sharp winter's eyes told him she didn't believe him, that she sensed something was off, and Cain cursed under his breath, because Lily had always said their daughter could see through anything, and he wondered how long he could keep this mask on before she pierced through it. Meanwhile, Daniel found himself restless, pacing in his studio, haunted by Cain's accusation and the memory of that night years ago with Lily, a night he had buried in the recesses of his mind, convincing himself it had been nothing more than two broken souls finding temporary comfort. But now Cain's words gnawed at him, forcing him to confront the possibility that Matty might be his daughter. And though he had sworn to Cain he never knew, now doubt crept in, because her mannerisms, her intelligence, her quiet strength, hadn't he noticed those qualities before and dismissed them as coincidence? And now those coincidences began to feel like truth staring him in the face, and Daniel, shaken, resolved to learn the truth, whether Cain wanted him to or not. It wasn't long before Phyllis, sensing Daniel's turmoil, cornered him at society, demanding to know what Cain had said to him, And when Daniel refused to answer, her suspicion grew, her instincts telling her there was a secret too explosive to ignore. And she reminded Daniel that keeping secrets had never ended well for anyone in Genoa City, especially not when children were involved. But Daniel, furious, told her to stay out of it, storming off while Phyllis smirked to herself, more convinced than ever that she was circling something huge. Back at home, Kane found himself staring at Lily's wedding photo on the mantel, whispering to it, asking why she had done this to him, why she had entrusted him to face the truth together, why she had chosen her dying breath to unload a secret that would rip apart the lives of everyone left behind. And though he longed to hate her for it, his love refused to die, his loyalty chained him to her even in death, and the conflict inside him ate away at his sanity. Charlie eventually came downstairs, joking about school and friends, but Kane barely heard him, his mind clouded, and Charlie frowned, asking what was wrong, if it was about Mom, and Kane snapped too harshly, telling him to drop it, before quickly apologizing, hugging his son tightly, desperate not to push him away too. And as he held Charlie, Kane thought bitterly how unfair it was that one twin was his by blood and the other wasn't. Yet in his heart he loved them both equally, and maybe that was Lily's point, that blood didn't matter when love was real, but the ache inside him refused to let go. Days later, Devon came by, worried about Kane's drinking and distracted behavior, urging him to focus on the twins, to honor Lily by staying strong, but Kane, guilt-ridden, nearly blurted the truth before biting it back, and Devon, though sympathetic, left more suspicious than before, sensing there was something Kane wasn't saying. Meanwhile, Mattie began noticing her father's late-night drinking, his restless pacing, his sudden mood swings, and though she tried to chalk it up to grief, a voice inside her whispered that it was something more, something he wasn't telling her, and when she confided her concerns to Charlie, he brushed it off, saying Dad was just sad. But Mattie wasn't convinced, and her determination to dig deeper set into motion the next step of this unraveling secret. One evening, Mattie approached her father in the living room, her voice trembling as she asked if Mom had said anything important before she passed, if there was something she wanted them to know, and Kane, caught off guard, froze, staring into her searching eyes, torn between protecting her and honoring Lily's plea for truth, and finally he forced a smile, repeating the same half-lie he told Devon, that Lily only said she loved them and wanted them to be strong. But Mattie frowned, unconvinced. Because her mother had always been intentional with her words, and something about her father's evasive tone told her there was more, something he wasn't ready to share. And as Kane turned away to refill his glass, Mattie whispered softly to herself, "What aren't you telling me, Dad?" And Kane's grip on the bottle tightened, the glass nearly shattering in his hand, because he knew that sooner or later, the truth would not just be Lily's secret, it would be his undoing.